Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Hot Seat. Today with us we have Lili Gil Valletta, and we're going to be talking about cultural intelligence. Hi Liliana, how are you doing?
Hi, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
It's a great pleasure to have you on Hot Seat. And you talk a lot about cultural intelligence. Could you please get us a bit more familiar with cultural intelligence?
Yes, I'm so excited to hear you ask about that because I honestly feel that's the wave of not the future, but the present. I'm going to give you the definition so that everyone gets grounded on what it is. So cultural intelligence to me is the ability to be aware of, understand, and apply cultural competence into everyday business. I'm going to say it again because as they say, repetition builds retention, right? So it's the ability to be aware of, understand, and apply cultural competence into everyday business. And there's magic in those three verbs and also in the everyday business. But I think we're going to talk more about it together just now.
Sure. And is this something relevant to just the big corporations, or is it something that every company should be aware of this?
I think, my big dream, I was actually talking to somebody about this morning, is that cultural intelligence becomes kind of like emotional intelligence was put on the map like back in the late 80s, early 90s in the business books and in the business talk. So it applies to everybody, whether you are a recent college graduate that is looking to find an edge and stay competitive in the world of business, or a seasoned corporate CEO. So at the end of the day is, if the world is becoming smaller more quickly because of technology and the digital connectivity we have, and if the shifting demographics of a country like the United States are so clearly shifting, we either embrace that and get ahead of it to apply it in business, or stay status quo and be left behind. So this applies to everybody that wants to stay competitive. So it's kind of like the emotional intelligence wave, which became so important in business leadership in general, but also it's kind of like digital. Like these days, we don't question whether we need it or not. It's just part of business. And my big dream is that cultural intelligence becomes that for everybody because it is there for all of us to take advantage of it.
Great. How can businesses turn cultural insights into a business advantage?
Mm-hmm. So as with anything in business, you find your sweet spot or competitive edge by doing your homework. So cultural intelligence is no different from the way you will go about understanding a market opportunity or looking into buying trends or shifts in your industry. But what's unique with this is when you are culturally intelligent, beyond just looking at the surface general number about your category or your business, you understand that there are levels of personalization in your customers you need to understand. And that is where understanding culture, which is more than just an ethnic label or gender, matters. It's funny to me that everyone is obsessed with personalization these days in a way because of digital. But when it comes to designing a shopping experience or a product or an interaction, we forget that human personalization matters as well. And that is where culture plays such a big role. So you can turn cultural trends into profits when you integrate that cultural personalization into the way you go to market, into the way you invest in R&D and new products, and into the way you design an experience every day for the people that you want to touch. So that is what it means to keep a pulse on the culture of the people you serve, so that you're constantly knowing the numbers, applying it, and turning it into business. That will make you unique and memorable versus your competition. And that's how you turn it into profit. It becomes this new discipline.
Great. And what about those businesses that are completely ignoring cultural intelligence? They just have their agenda and they're putting it out there. What's going to happen with them?
It's a game of numbers. I always say that unfortunately, we're in an era where the D word, as I like to call it, which is the diversity word, has become this emotional thing. And not to be insensitive of the fact that those people issues matter, but I am having a business dialogue. This is about the math and the numbers and how you're going to achieve your P&L objectives and your growth targets with Wall Street. It is mathematically impossible for any business to achieve their full potential and growth without getting cultural intelligence right. Why? Because the shifts are way too big to ignore. So to those that may be falling asleep at the wheel or ignoring it because it's an emotional thing or they don't agree with it, at the end of the day, the numbers are going to tell a story. That may not be a very good one. So I often say we need to graduate from having this altruistic discussion about inclusion and realize that it's just good business that is going to help you get your bonus and hit your numbers at the end of the year. So don't let personal bias get in the way of good decision making, because the numbers will not work any other way. So it will catch up to them.
Yeah, I was doing quite a bit of research and I saw that you do quite a lot of data mining from different sources. Is this relevant just to those companies that are doing marketing to mass audiences, or this is also something which is relevant to business marketing, where numbers are usually a bit smaller?
Mm-hmm. Once again, I truly believe that this notion of cultural intelligence is a mindset that needs to be part of the way any leader ought to interpret and understand the world around them, regardless of the industry, B2C, B2B, it doesn't matter. This is basically realizing that there is power in personalization and the personalized experience that you can deliver to that person you're meeting on the other end. If I am B2B and I acknowledge that there is a rising either culture, demographic, or market that may be untapped or misunderstood, but I get to understand, that's going to make you stand apart. I was actually in the Middle East not too long ago. Just a couple of weeks ago, I was in Bahrain, which is right in the middle between, Saudi Arabia, for those that are not familiar with the region. And I was having this conversation with them that you can take advantage of that unique position, in this case, this country has, for interpreting what the region represents in business. But if they just keep to themselves and not maximize it when they're making a dialogue or cutting a contract with a company in the U.S. that wants to do business in the Middle East, then they miss out on their competitive advantage of cultural intelligence for bridging into the region. So that may be more of a B2B example. But what I'm saying is we need to, no matter what, whether it's a $100,000 contract or a $100 million contract that you're negotiating B2B or B2C, it's acknowledging the fact that cultural shifts and those dynamics matter in the way we crunch the numbers for looking into sources of growth, period.
Yeah.
So that is going to be important, because one size doesn't fit all.
Yeah. And would this be just looking at numbers, or you also look into kind of qualitative data?
That's a great question. So I am a geek of numbers. I think we get in trouble sometimes. I'm not discounting that qualitative methods are not important, because they are. But we have seen as of lately how accurate polls are, right? Or the market research industry in the U.S. is still a $19 billion industry. And most of that, about a third of that industry, continues to be mostly surveys, questionnaires, and focus groups. Now, are we comfortable making a multi-million-dollar decision based on what 50 people told you in a room? I wouldn't be so comfortable, especially if technology can help us do this better. So a lot of the work that I'm doing these days is using new methods where we can add the science of new technologies to understand the humanity in people, even though that sounds like a contradiction, but doing more like quantitative analysis of qualitative data, which is a lot of the work we're doing with Culture Intel. Yeah. So yes, qual matters, but the more unbiased, unsolicited, and candid you can be, the more pure the insight will be. We need to stop kind of talking to ourselves when we do these focus groups or surveys, because you end up getting the same answer, and many times they're not right. They're just what you want to hear.
So when you're doing this kind of research, how do you manage to remain unbiased, and how would you present the data to your client and your client interprets it in an unbiased manner?
Mm-hmm. This is kind of silly to say and admit, but it is what it is. As long as there's humans involved, there will always be bias. Period.
Yeah.
Because we all interpret the world based on our own interpretation of our world. But that is why we need all of us in the room to kind of test and pull and push each other. But let me take also a step back. In the way we do our research is very unique. It already is removing some of that researcher bias. And I'm not just saying that. We have done this work in partnership with big universities like Harvard University, and they have said this, that our method is able to pull out researcher bias. This is why we have figured out a way to scrape and mine every single digital discussion that is openly available. I'm not talking about social media, Facebook, Twitter. That is where people put their pretty face with 10 filters. Every single place where there is a comment. And even though it sounds like weird that there are blogs and forums and topical sites, yes, there are thousands of them.
Yeah.
And we have been able to take all of that and make sense out of the patterns of opinion based on the voice of the people about every single topic that they discuss every day. From women that are talking about their barriers to treatment if they just got diagnosed with breast cancer, to moms that are choosing a product, or people who are selecting or electing a politician. So the method itself already removes the bias of a researcher asking a question. I never ask a question. I am just listening to the wisdom of the crowd openly. And letting then machine learning and artificial intelligence helps us very quickly process millions of data points so that I can see the patterns in the voice of the people. That's why this is so different.
Okay, very, very interesting. And how can we change the mindset of companies to start seeing data as a very valuable asset?
Mm-hmm. I think they're starting to get there. You know, when you see that, for example, Marriott International gets hacked, and this just happened, and thousands of records of their customer data got compromised, and immediately their stock dropped 6%. That is showing you that the access or protection or good use of data has an impact in the bottom line, and it has an impact in the way people perceive your value as a company in financial terms. That to me was a critical moment, and this just happened like 3 weeks ago. I said, wow, that is a moment when I'm seeing that data is an actual asset, and it needs to be treated as that with equity and equity contribution to a company. So that said, I think more and more companies are realizing that data matters. But also, it's not just about having the data, but what you do with it. Otherwise, you end up with analysis paralysis. You analyze it forever and do nothing with it, which I see, and I say this respectfully, with a lot of my big corporate clients. They don't have a lack of data, but it's more of actionable insight, what sometimes is lacking when you have so much. So I think companies do realize that the data is there, but I guess my question and challenge to them is twofold. One is, what are you doing with it, besides just looking at a pretty dashboard and that's it? And number two, how deep are you going into layers of personalization or segmentation of that data? Because that is where sometimes we lose the depth in the humanity and assume that an insight applies to all in a category when it's not necessarily the case. So are you using it? And are you understanding it deep enough that you get the true human essence that helps you differentiate from everyone else?
Great. One last question. Is this methodology replacing traditional methodologies?
So I don't think it's replacing. I think it will be very kind of irreverent of me to say that, kind of discounting a whole $19 billion industry. But I think it's a contributor. You know, it's a new ingredient for us to kind of cook a better dish in the kitchen. So what what I do see is that some of these tech-enabled AI methods, like what we're doing, help expedite an early and quick understanding of people. And once you get some hints of the areas that are important to a particular group, it's always good to have a follow-up with traditional methods so that you can confirm some of those findings at scale. So I see it as a complement where I can go into a focus group or a traditional questionnaire, but I can inform the way that questionnaire is designed based on big data and not based on 5 executives in a conference room who are thinking about questions. So that's the difference, is how I can be more disciplined and tech-enabled in the way I design the question that eventually makes it into a survey or a poll. So it's helping upstream. That's how I see it working all together. Because you do want to ask a human at some point. So I'm not discounting that.
To validate.
But it's the when, exactly.
I know that you have lots of great content. Where could viewers follow you and see more of your content?
Yeah, so I definitely have a lot of different channels. When you go to, probably my personal website is a good hub. So lilianagil.com, maybe you can type it and show it to the folks watching, but lilianagil.com, from there you get a link into Culture Intel, which is our data science company, or CIEN, which focuses more on the consultancy and cultural marketing side. But it also has the links to YouTube and LinkedIn and all kinds of different places where I'm constantly posting videos and opinion pieces, etc. So that's why I say lilianagil.com is probably that, traffic control that will take you somewhere.
Yeah, I strongly recommend our viewers to follow Liliana. I follow Liliana, and she has amazing content, right? Especially when you go to different places. Yesterday, I watched the tiny clip of McDonald's when you were at McDonald's in Thailand, and that was something really interesting for me to watch. Liliana, thank you very much for sharing this information with us. It has been very interesting. I learned a lot, and thank you for your time.
No, thank you, and thank you for sharing these kinds of important topics and conversations with the world. So hopefully you are all inspired to activate the power of cultural intelligence in whatever it is you do.
Great. Thank you very much. In the meantime, we invite you to follow us on Facebook, on our YouTube channel, and we will be sharing with you lots of more interviews in the near future. Until then, see you soon.